Have you ever felt like you're trying too hard and yet money seems to slip through your fingers? Have you ever looked up at the sky and asked yourself, why don't things ever flow for me like they do for others? What if I told you that maybe what you're missing isn't luck, but a simple change in mindset? Today, I'm going to tell you the story of Lucas, a young man like you and me, full of dreams but suffocated by bills, debts, and doubts. He wanted to start his own business, achieve financial freedom, but it seemed the universe was always one step ahead, saying not yet. Until one day, something changed. Lucas discovered a silent power, the power to create his own reality through his thoughts, emotions, and the vibration he emitted. From that moment on, his life began to transform in ways he couldn't even believe. From unemployment to prosperity, from fear to confidence, Lucas discovered that the law of attraction isn't magic, it's consciousness. But before I tell you how it all happened, tell me, are you already subscribed to this channel? If not, take this opportunity to subscribe, like, and comment below where in the world you're listening to this story from. I really want to know how far this energy of prosperity is reaching. Because if this video appeared to you, it wasn't by chance. Maybe the universe is about to show you the same path it showed Lucas. Lucas always had that sparkle in his eyes, a sign of someone born for something greater. Since childhood, he dreamed of owning his own business, of creating something that would carry his name and essence to the world. But life, with its twists and turns and bills, always seemed to remind him that dreaming was expensive. He would wake up early, take crowded buses, and return late, carrying more fatigue than hope. Still, something inside him never faded. A stubborn flame, insisting that life could be different. The days repeated themselves like a tired clock. His salary barely covered the bills, and his dreams were shelved in the drawer, along with notes of ideas and unfinished plans. Lucas looked at his bank statement and felt that lump in his throat, the sensation of running without moving forward. Sometimes he imagined what it would be like to live without that tightness in his chest, without having to choose between paying a bill or buying something that would make him happy. It was as if abundance was always just around the corner. Still, there was something curious about Lucas. He never complained too much, never gave up completely. He had a quiet way of believing even when no one else believed in him. Sometimes between coffees, he would let out a shy smile, like someone silently conversing with destiny. Maybe it was intuition, maybe it was faith, or maybe just that deep desire to prove to himself that there was still a way. The nights were his allies. When the world slept, Lucas daydreamed. He grabbed his old notebook, scribbled business ideas, did the math, and tried to imagine what it would be like if money weren't a problem. He saw his name on signs, saw smiling clients, saw freedom. But reality soon knocked on the door, reminding him that the bank balance still said otherwise. Still, he kept writing, as if each word were a seed planted in the dark. And it was in this silence between fear and dream that something began to shift. Lucas began to realize that the problem might not be the world outside, but what he carried inside. A restlessness grew, begging to be heard, a subtle, almost imperceptible voice that seemed to whisper, what if the secret to change isn't in effort, but in how you see life? Lucas's days all seemed the same, as if time had forgotten to bring new things. His alarm clock always rang at the same time, and he woke up with that mixture of haste and exhaustion that only those with overdue bills understand. The commute to work was long, and he stared out the bus window, trying to make sense of the colorless back and forth. Sometimes he wondered if this was all there was to it, working, paying, starting over, without ever truly living. At work, the atmosphere was heavy. People complained, dreams were shelved, and laughter was forced to mask discouragement. Lucas performed his tasks in silence, with a competence few noticed. Deep down, he felt his soul yearning for more, something to make his heart race, something to give purpose to his routine. But whenever he thought about it, an inner voice reminded him, You need to pay the rent first. Nights continued to be his refuge. When he got home, he'd take off his shoes and the weight of the day, sit on his bed, and stare at the ceiling for long minutes. Sometimes he'd wonder when he'd stopped believing in his own dreams. It seemed life was always teaching him to conform, as if happiness were a luxury reserved for the few. And as much as it pained him to admit it, Lucas was starting to believe it. He tried to find small joys in the gaps: a hot coffee, a quick chat with a friend, a sunset scene from his bedroom window. But even these moments seemed distant when his bank balance tightened around him. Money was tight, and his dreams were too expensive for his wallet. And yet, the desire for change persisted, silent but firm, like a spark hidden beneath the ashes of routine. And it was on one of those ordinary nights, with the sound of rain beating against the window, that something began to awaken inside him. A simple, yet powerful thought crossed his mind. What if I'm looking in the wrong direction? What if the key isn't in what's missing, but in what I already have? This question echoed, like a whisper he couldn't yet answer. Lucas grew up hearing that money was difficult, almost impossible to earn honestly. In his home, phrases like, "Those born poor die poor," were spoken casually, as if they were laws of life. And without realizing it, he kept these words inside him, like seeds that would later grow into walls. Every time he tried to dream bigger, an inner voice nipped him in the bud, telling him, "This isn't for you." These beliefs became invisible, but they were everywhere. When he saw someone thriving, Lucas thought there must be luck involved, or some privilege he would never have. The success of others became a reflection of his own limitations, and little by little, he began to believe that life was truly about survival, paying the bills, waiting for the weekend, and hoping for enough left over for a coffee out. Inside, he felt torn. Part of him wanted to believe there was a higher power, something beyond effort and luck. But the other part, shaped by years of hardship, still weighed him down. It was like trying to run with his feet tied together. He tried to change, but memories of the past always came back to remind him of who he should be. And yet, sometimes between one thought and another, he would find himself wondering, what if everything they told me isn't true? This simple thought made him breathe differently, as if for a moment he could see the world in different colors. But soon, fear would come, clenching his chest. He was afraid of believing too much and being disappointed again. At the time, Lucas didn't know it yet, but something inside him was beginning to stir. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, like the first ray of sunlight shining through a crack, a small glimmer of awareness emerging amidst the darkness of old beliefs. He didn't yet understand what it was. He just felt he was about to discover something that would change everything. Lucas's life continued at a pace of survival until one day, everything came crashing down. The company he worked for announced layoffs, and he, always dedicated, ended up being one of the chosen ones. The cold email with the layoff notice seemed to echo inside him like thunder. In a matter of minutes, the ground he knew disappeared. The small but stable security turned to uncertainty and fear. In the following days, the clock seemed to tick slowly. Lucas woke up early, but now aimlessly. The silence in his room weighed more heavily than any work routine. The bills kept arriving, relentless, and the remaining money wouldn't last long. He felt trapped, with no way out. It was as if the universe had suddenly turned off all the lights, leaving him alone in the dark. But it was precisely in this darkness that something began to shine. Amidst anguish and despair, he realized he could no longer live the same way. There was an inner force, subtle but persistent, that made him wonder if that fall had a hidden purpose. What if, deep down, it was a push towards something greater? The idea sounded absurd, but it never stopped pulsing. One sleepless night, Lucas walked around the house and looked at his reflection in the mirror. He saw a tired face, but he also saw a look that wouldn't let up. It was as if a part of him was saying, Enough, you weren't born to repeat this cycle. It was in that moment that he understood perhaps this loss was just the beginning of a new phase, still invisible, but waiting to be created. And with that thought, something sparked inside him. It wasn't hope yet. It was curiosity. The curiosity to discover if there was another way to live, another way to think. Something that could transform not only his wallet, but his very way of seeing the world. And without realizing it, Lucas was about to stumble upon the answer that would change his destiny. One random afternoon, amidst the inertia of the days, Lucas found himself mindlessly scrolling through his phone. Then a video appeared, one of those videos that seem to appear out of nowhere, but arrive at just the right time. A woman was talking about the power of thoughts, about how the energy we emit shapes what we receive. He almost skipped the video, but something about that message captivated him. It was as if someone had spoken directly to his soul. Over the next few days, that idea wouldn't leave his mind. Lucas began researching further, reading stories of people who changed their lives simply by changing their mindset. It seemed too magical to be real, and at the same time it made a sense he couldn't explain. He thought, what if I'm creating my own reality without realizing it? This question echoed like an invitation to something new. Over time he discovered it had a name, the law of attraction. It was the belief that thoughts, emotions and vibrations shape what we attract. Lucas found it beautiful, inspiring, but also a bit unlikely. After all, if it were that simple, why wasn't everyone happy and prosperous? Still, something inside him insisted he keep listening. It was as if the universe were whispering, try it, see what happens. One night, he watched an entire documentary on the subject. The words "you create what you believe" lingered in his mind for hours. He looked around, his simple room, the bills on the table, his hope all but extinguished, and thought, if I created all this by accident, what would happen if I started creating it on purpose? It was the first time he felt a thrill of possibility, and it was there, in that silent, almost mystical moment, that something changed. There was no music, no sign of heaven, just a calm decision arising within him, to try. Lucas didn't know how or when, but he felt he needed to give this new way of seeing the world a chance. Without realizing it, he had just opened the door to a journey that would transform everything he knew about life and about himself. In the early days, Lucas took it all in stride. He heard the words about vibration, energy and the power of the mind, but his reason persisted in doubting. After all, he came from a life where nothing seemed easy, where every achievement required sweat and sacrifice. To think that simply believing could change everything sounded too naive. Still, he couldn't simply ignore what he felt when he heard those messages. Sometimes he laughed at himself as he tried to repeat affirmations in the mirror. I'm prosperous, he'd say, and soon a skeptical voice would respond inside him. Really, it was as if two versions of Lucas coexisted, one full of hope and the other afraid of looking foolish for believing. Even so, he kept trying, like someone who decides to dabble in the impossible just to see what happens. With each new reading, each video watched, something inside him began to shift. He no longer knew if he fully believed it, but he realized he felt better when he thought positively, and that in itself was a start. Lucas began to understand that perhaps the power of the law of attraction wasn't in performing magic, but in changing the energy with which he viewed the world. But the old pattern wouldn't give up easily. Some days the doubts would return, stronger. Will this really work? What if it's all nonsense? He wanted to believe, but the fear of disappointment kept him caught between two worlds, the old realism and the new faith. Yet, every time he thought about giving up, something small would happen, a phrase, a sign, a shiver, and hope would be reborn. Until, one of those nights of uncertainty, Lucas looked to the sky and made a silent request. If this is real, show me a sign. He didn't know what to expect, but there was sincerity in that prayer. It was as if, for the first time, he had spoken directly to the universe. And little did he know, the universe was already listening. After so many nights of doubt, Lucas began to realize something that had previously gone unnoticed. His thoughts carried real weight. He noticed that on the days he woke up complaining, everything seemed to go wrong. The bus was late. People's moods were heavy. The weather seemed cloudy inside and out. But when, for some reason, he woke up feeling lighter, things flowed more easily. It was as if the world responded to what he felt. This discovery sparked a new curiosity. He began to observe his own thoughts, almost as if spying on a visitor inside his own mind. He realized how accustomed he was to focusing on lack, to repeating phrases of scarcity without realizing it. I don't have the money for that. Those things never happened to me. I wasn't born to be rich. These were mantras of limitation he'd been repeating for years, and now he saw them clearly. Each day, his awareness expanded a little more. Lucas began to understand that his mind was like a garden, and that, until then, he had been watering the weeds without noticing. He found himself asking, "What do I want to see grow in here?" This thought made him smile, as if discovering a power hidden all along, right before his eyes. It was strange to realize that bad things didn't come out of nowhere. They came from what he harbored, from the emotions he mindlessly repeated. Lucas understood that the universe didn't react to what he said he wanted, but to what he truly felt. And that changed everything. He began to test it. When he felt grateful, small gestures seemed to happen in response, almost as if the world blinked back. And it was in this process of observing and feeling that Lucas began to truly awaken. He couldn't explain it, but he felt a new lightness. It was as if a window had opened in his mind, and the fresh air of possibility began to enter. The awakening didn't come with fireworks or mystical revelations. It came with silence, presence, and a new perspective on himself, a perspective that would soon lead him to an even greater decision. After observing his thoughts for so long, Lucas realized that simply understanding wasn't enough. He needed to decide to change. And this decision didn't come with a grand speech or dramatic promises. It came in a calm moment, as he drank coffee and watched the sun stream through the window. He took a deep breath and thought, "Enough. I don't want to live on autopilot anymore. From today on, I choose to believe I can do it." It was a simple moment, yet filled with power. Lucas felt something different course through his body, a mixture of courage and tranquility. It was as if the universe had stopped for a second to listen to that decision. And suddenly, everything around him seemed clearer, as if the world had been waiting for that yes for a long time. He didn't know what would come next, but he knew there was no turning back. From that day on, he began committing to small gestures, replacing thoughts of scarcity with words of abundance, observing more, complaining less. Every morning he wrote down 3 things he was grateful for, even if they were simple: a hot coffee, a roof over his head, the sound of the wind. Little by little, his inner energy began to shift, and with it his outlook on life too. Not every day was easy. Sometimes fear still knocked on the door, reminding him of bills, unemployment, and uncertainty. But now Lucas had a new anchor, the choice not to feed fear, but to embrace faith. He understood that believing wasn't denying reality. It was deciding to create a new one, and this realization strengthened him in a way he'd never felt before. It was thus, between small rituals and deep reflections, that Lucas took his first real step toward transformation. There was no clear plan, no guarantees, but there was a certainty in his heart. Something was changing. And without realizing it, this silent decision would be the starting point for everything fate was about to deliver. Lucas started slowly, unhurriedly, but with intention. Every morning he opened his notebook and wrote words that made him feel good, even if, at first, they didn't seem true. "I am prosperous. The universe is with me. Everything is aligning in my favor." At first he felt a certain discomfort, as if he were lying to himself, but the more he wrote, the more those phrases came to life within him. He also began to practice gratitude, sincerely. He began to give thanks for small things he'd previously taken for granted. A hot cup of coffee, a stranger's smile, the good weather on the day of an interview. Little by little, he realized that life seemed to reciprocate this. It was as if by giving thanks, he was making room for more reasons to be grateful. And they did arrive, in simple ways, yet full of meaning. Beyond gratitude, Lucas discovered the power of visualization. He would close his eyes and imagine his business running smoothly, his clients satisfied, and the feeling of financial freedom. He saw the scenes in such detail that he could even smell the office, the sound of conversations, the feel of money in his hand. It was like watching his own future, but with his heart in the present. And little by little, it stopped feeling like a dream and began to seem possible. In moments of doubt, he would return to his notebook. He would read what he had written, reminding himself why he had begun. Each sentence became an anchor, a reminder that everything began in the mind. And the more he practiced, the more he realized that transformation didn't come from outside. It came from the feeling of belief, even without proof. It was as if he were rebuilding his own energy brick by brick, thought by thought. And so it was, with small daily practices, that Lucas began to feel the vibration of change. It wasn't visible yet, but it was palpable in the air. A lightness, a new confidence, a premonition that something big was coming. He just didn't imagine that. Very soon the universe would begin to respond in ways he could never have planned. It was then that strange things began to happen. Small coincidences that at first glance seemed ordinary, but had a touch of magic. An old friend sent a message out of the blue, talking about a free entrepreneurship course. That same day, Lucas found a folded banknote on the ground, right in front of his house. Coincidence? Maybe. But he felt it was something more, as if the universe was starting to wink at him. These small signs sparked something inside him. Each synchronicity seemed to confirm that he was on the right path. Lucas began to notice that when his mind was calm and confident, everything flowed more smoothly. The right people appeared. Opportunities presented themselves naturally. It was as if the world outside had changed, but deep down he knew it was he who had changed. One day, while drinking coffee at a bakery, he overheard a man talking about vibration and purpose at the next table, words that echoed exactly what he'd been thinking the past few nights. He smiled, nodded, and thought, "Okay, universe, get it." From that moment on, Lucas began to treat every encounter, every sentence, every event as part of a silent conversation between himself and life. These coincidences almost became a game. Lucas would wake up curious, wondering what kind of sign the universe would show him that day. And the most beautiful thing was that, by seeking these signs, he lived with greater presence. Everything seemed more meaningful. Time, people, small gestures. It was as if the world were being painted with new colors, more vivid, more hopeful. And so, the magic began to become routine. He still couldn't see the material results of the transformation, but his heart was already vibrating differently. For the first time, Lucas felt that life was on his side, not against him, and this feeling drove him on, believing that each sign was a reminder that something greater was being prepared. Just when everything seemed to be falling into place, life decided to test Lucas's newfound faith. An unexpected problem arose. A large bill, a delay in a payment he expected, a challenge that shook him emotionally. For a moment he felt the old fear return, that voice that said, "See, nothing changes." It was as if the universe wanted to see if he truly believed in what he had been practicing. In the first moments he almost gave in. Desperation is quick, you know. It hits hard, makes your heart race, and your mind doubt. Lucas sat up in bed, stared at the ceiling, and wondered if all that law of attraction stuff was really real or just a pretty illusion. But amidst the confusion, he took a deep breath. He remembered everything he'd been feeling these past few weeks, the peace, the synchronicities, the signs, and decided not to let it get him down. Instead of complaining, he fell silent. He closed his eyes and said softly, "I trust." It was a simple phrase, but filled with power. He realized that faith isn't the absence of doubt. It's following through even when doubt screams. And in that moment, Lucas felt something shift inside. The fear didn't disappear, but it paled in comparison to the new confidence that was emerging. The following days were still challenging, but his reaction was different. Instead of focusing on the problem, he began to visualize solutions. Instead of focusing on scarcity, he chose to focus on gratitude. And curiously, things began to work themselves out one by one, as if the universe had been waiting for him to align again before acting. It was as if life was saying, "I just needed to see if you were truly ready." This episode marked a turning point in Lucas's journey. From that moment on, he understood that believing was easy when everything was going well. True power lay in maintaining faith when everything seemed to be falling apart. And without realizing it, that test prepared him for the next step, the transformation that would begin within himself before appearing in the world outside. After that test, something truly changed within Lucas. He realized that the law of attraction wasn't just about wishing for things, it was about being different. What had previously been an effort became a state of presence. He began to realize that prosperity wasn't limited to money, but to the way he felt when he woke up, looking at the sky, trusting that the day would bring what he needed. It was as if life had taken on a new rhythm, smoother and yet more purposeful. Lucas began paying more attention to his emotions than to numbers. When he felt good, he noticed his day flowed. When he let himself get down, everything stalled. That's when he understood vibration comes before manifestation. And for the first time, this phrase didn't sound like theory, it was lived experience. He began tending his thoughts like one tends a garden, choosing what to plant, what to let go, what to let flourish. Over time, the old fear faded. The weight of scarcity that once dominated his mind dissipated, giving way to a profound calm. Lucas felt at peace even when he didn't see immediate results. And this peace, curiously, began to attract better situations. It was as if the universe was just waiting for him to stop fighting the flow before it began delivering what was rightfully his. He began to live more lightly. He learned to smile at the little things, to trust in the right timing of answers, to allow himself to rest without guilt. He discovered that the energy of abundance comes not from effort, but from surrender, from that point where you know everything is okay, even before it is. And it was in this state that he began to feel the power of true transformation. Not the kind that changes the world outside, but the kind that changes the world within. This new awareness made Lucas feel more alive than ever. His mind, previously filled with worries, was now a space for creation. He no longer waited for things to happen, he allowed them to happen. And at this point of serenity and trust, the universe began to move the pieces that would initiate the most visible part of the change, the turning point that was about to transform his dreams into reality. Lucas began to wake up different. He was no longer the same man who opened his eyes worried about bills or an uncertain future. Now, he woke with purpose, feeling that each new day brought a chance to create something greater. This change didn't come from outside, it came from the way he felt inside. And suddenly, life began to respond in a new way, as if to say, "Now you get it." He began to act more intuitively. When he felt a slight impulse, he followed without fear. And these actions, no matter how small, opened doors. An invitation to a conversation, an idea that emerged in the middle of a shower, an unexpected contact. Everything seemed to fit together, like pieces of an invisible puzzle. Lucas realized he didn't need to force anything. He just had to align with what made sense and let the flow happen. This new energy was also reflected in the way he spoke. His words were more certain, his eyes bright. People began to notice the difference. even without understanding what had changed. "You feel lighter," they would say, and he smiled, because he knew the secret lay in something no one saw. The vibrational state he nurtured every day, with faith, gratitude, and purpose. Over time, Lucas realized that acting with inspiration is different from acting out of desperation. Before, he did things out of fear of not having enough. Now he did them with the joy of creating. And that difference was everything. He understood that prosperity isn't about chasing after something. It's about walking in tune with what you believe in. It was at this calm but steady pace that opportunities began to arise more frequently. Each confident step seemed to multiply the possibilities. Lucas felt in tune with something greater, as if he had finally found the right frequency. The universe silently responded with increasingly clear signs that something big was on its way. He didn't know exactly what, but he felt it. The turning point he had been waiting for was about to materialize. It was on an ordinary day that the opportunity presented itself, so simple it almost went unnoticed. An old friend invited him to help with a small online sales project. Nothing grand, just an initial idea, with no guarantee of return. Lucas almost refused, thinking it wasn't what he was looking for, but something in his heart made him stop, take a breath and say yes. It was as if an inner voice said, "Don't ignore what seems small, that's where the big begins." In the early days, everything was confusing. Lucas was still adapting, learning about platforms, strategies, and clients. Sometimes he made mistakes, sometimes he got things right, but always with that feeling of being in the right place. He realized that each challenge came with a learning experience, and that everything that had seemed difficult before now seemed part of the process. For the first time, he didn't see obstacles, he saw steps. Over time, the project began to grow. New ideas emerged easily, and the right people seemed to approach us effortlessly. One partner recommended another, a client brought two more, and before long the small project was turning into something bigger than Lucas could have imagined. It was as if the universe was saying, "I just needed you to trust me." He began to realize that prosperity doesn't arrive with fanfare, but with subtlety. It hides in chance encounters, in seemingly insignificant decisions, in the doors that open when you follow your intuition. Lucas understood that destiny doesn't shout, it whispers, and those who learn to listen to these whispers find the path that many spend their lives searching for. And so, step by step, Lucas saw his entrepreneurial dream take shape. It wasn't yet his dream business, but it was the beginning of the realization of everything he'd envisioned for months. And the most incredible thing was that he felt this was just the beginning, as if the universe were preparing something even greater, waiting for the exact moment to reveal the next chapter. With each new achievement, Lucas reinforced his habit of visualization. Every morning before even picking up his phone, he closed his eyes and imagined himself living the life he dreamed of. He saw his business growing, his clients happy, the glow of satisfaction on his face. He could smell the new office, the sound of the team's laughter, the feeling of success flowing naturally. It was so real that for a few minutes, he forgot he wasn't there yet. These moments became fuel for his soul. When his mind doubted, visualization reconnected him with the certainty that everything was already on its way. He understood that he didn't need to force the future. He just needed to feel as if he were already there. This daily practice began to change not only his thoughts, but also his posture, his energy, his outlook. He was vibrating at the frequency of what he desired. Lucas created a dream board and hung it on his bedroom wall. On it he pasted images representing prosperity, freedom, and impact. Each figure was a reminder of who he was becoming. Sometimes he would stand there, silently observing, feeling each image as a memory foretold. There was no longer any rush, just a calm trust that the universe knew the way. Over time, he realized that visualizations weren't just daydreams. They were rehearsals for reality. When an opportunity arose, he felt prepared, as if he'd experienced it 1,000 times. Fear faded, and clarity took over. Lucas learned that visualization isn't daydreaming. It's aligning your heart with what you want to experience in the physical world. And it was in this state of alignment and trust that something began to move more intensely. Coincidences became greater synchronicities, and ideas became clearer. Lucas felt that what had previously been merely a vision was now about to materialize. He just didn't know that life was about to prove, in a surprising way, the power of what he had been imagining for so long. It was then that the unexpected began to happen. Simple ideas, which had previously seemed worthless, began to yield results. A product he had created intuitively began to sell more and more. Clients began to appear through referrals, without him having to seek them out. Lucas observed everything with amazement and gratitude, as if the universe was finally showing him what happens when someone truly believes. He remembered the days of doubt, the moments when fear nearly made him give up. Now, each victory felt like a reminder that the impossible is merely the possible that has yet to manifest. Things flowed with a naturalness he had never experienced before. It was as if fate had been waiting for him to align itself to open the floodgates of abundance. The curious thing is that the results weren't just in numbers. Lucas noticed changes in everything, in the people around him, in the conversations, in the opportunities that crossed his path. He felt in tune with life, as if there were music playing in the background, and his every step was dancing to the right rhythm. Prosperity was now a state of being, not just having. One afternoon, he received a message that left him speechless for a few seconds. It was a partnership proposal with a larger company interested in the work he was developing. The same project that had started small, almost unassumingly, was now attracting the attention of people he never imagined it would reach. Lucas smiled and looked up at the sky, with that look of someone who understands the message without needing words. He couldn't explain it, but he felt something greater guiding him. It was as if everything he had envisioned was materializing before his eyes, detail by detail, gesture by gesture, and deep in his heart, he knew this was only the beginning. Because the universe, when it sees an aligned heart, doesn't just deliver what was asked for. It also delivers what was beyond dreams. Time passed, and when he least expected it, Lucas saw his dream become reality. What was once just an idea in a notebook now had form, movement, and purpose. He had officially opened his own business, small, yes, but full of soul. He remembered the nights he'd visualized this moment, the days he'd doubted and realized everything had happened exactly as he'd imagined, even when nothing seemed possible. The office was simple, but it had a different energy. The walls seemed to carry the vibration of every positive thought he'd cultivated. As he sat in the chair and looked around, Lucas felt something he'd never felt before: belonging. He was no longer a spectator of life, he was its creator. And there, in that space, he understood that every step of the journey, including the falls, had brought him to that moment. The first clients arrived naturally, almost magically. People he'd never met, but who seemed to have been guided there. Every message, every call, every confirmed sale was accompanied by an almost childlike emotion, the joy of witnessing their own miracle unfold. Lucas no longer saw coincidences, he saw alignments. And with each new day, his confidence grew. Soon, the business began to thrive. Revenue increased, opportunities multiplied, and Lucas realized that money was now a consequence of the energy he maintained. He worked with ease, smiled often, and was grateful for everything, even the challenges. He knew that the energy of gratitude was the fuel for growth, and this made each achievement taste even sweeter. At the end of a remarkable day, he turned off the lights in his office, took a deep breath, and sat in silence for a few seconds. He looked at his reflection in the glass and saw a different man, not just more prosperous, but more aware, more whole. He smiled and thought, "This is what I envisioned." And in that peaceful smile, the universe seemed to smile back, as if to say, "Welcome to the reality you created." Over time, Lucas realized that gratitude wasn't just a practice, it was a state of being. He woke up every day grateful, not because he had everything, but because he finally felt everything. The air, the coffee, the simple fact of being able to work with what he loved. With each thank you, he said quietly, he felt his heart expand a little more. It was as if the universe breathed along with him in perfect harmony. He began to write down every blessing of the day, no matter how small. An unexpected compliment, an extra sale, a sincere smile. These simple gestures kept him connected to the abundance that had always been around, but which he could only now see. Lucas understood that the more he gave thanks, the more reasons the universe gave him to continue giving thanks. It was a cycle, light, continuous, infinite. The energy of gratitude also transformed him into a more generous person. He began to share what he knew, helping others see their own power. He said, prosperity grows when it is shared. And curiously, the more he gave, the more he received, the money flowed. But what truly fulfilled him was seeing that his story inspired others to believe they too could rewrite their lives. Lucas realized that his journey was no longer just about success, but about service, about raising the vibration of those around him. Every conversation became an opportunity to plant a seed of hope. He knew that not everyone was ready to understand the power of the mind, but all it took was a spark of curiosity, and the transformation could begin, just as it had for him. And it was at this point in his journey that Lucas understood something profound. The cycle of gratitude is the secret to continuity. There is no end for those who live with an open heart. The prosperity he achieved was not the destination. It was just the beginning of a journey that now expanded far beyond him. And without realizing it, the man who once sought answers now became one of them. As the months passed, Lucas began to look back with a feeling of wonder and awe. He remembered the man who one day woke up hopeless, trapped in debt and doubt, and could hardly believe he was the same man now living a full life. Everything changed, not just his bank account, but the way he saw the world. He understood that true wealth begins in the mind and blossoms in the heart. In his silent pauses, Lucas reflected on the power of choice. How many times had life invited him to give up, and yet, even without strength, he chose to keep believing. It was this faith, sometimes small and trembling, that kept him moving. He learned that the universe doesn't need perfection, it only needs willingness. The simple act of believing was the first step toward transformation. With each memory, he felt gratitude for the pain as well. He realized that without the difficult days, he wouldn't have discovered the strength within him. Without the fall, he wouldn't have awakened. Each obstacle was a teacher in disguise, pushing him toward expansion. Lucas smiled at the thought that in the end, everything always made sense, even what seemed like chaos. He now lived with more calm, more presence. He learned that success is not an arrival point, but a state of consciousness. That abundance is waking up in peace, knowing you are aligned with the flow of life, and that nothing, absolutely nothing, is impossible for those who believe with all their heart. It was this certainty that kept him serene, even in the face of new challenges that arose. And as he watched the sunset through his office window, Lucas thought, life has always been on my side. It's just that I've been slow to realize it. The golden light touched his face, and in that instant he understood. The law of attraction hadn't just changed his destiny, it had reconnected him with who he truly was. And best of all, this story was just beginning. At that moment, Lucas realized that true achievement wasn't money or material success, but the power to change from within. The prosperity he now experienced was a reflection of the peace he carried in his soul. He no longer sought to prove anything to anyone, simply to live with ease and purpose. His journey had become a silent testament to the fact that faith and action go hand in hand, and that the universe rewards those who dare to believe. Over time, people began seeking him out to find out how he did it. Lucas smiled and said the secret wasn't in complicated techniques, but in the way of feeling. Everything changes when you decide to vibrate in love, not fear. He spoke simply, but his words carried weight. It was the voice of someone who had experienced the impossible and made it real. Now his days were guided by purpose. Every decision, every encounter, every word was charged with intention. He no longer saw money as an end, but as a tool to expand the good he could generate in the world. And the most beautiful thing was realizing that the more he shared, the more the universe gave back, like a luminous mirror, reflecting its own light. Lucas understood that prosperity wasn't a fixed destination, but a living path. A cycle of learning, surrender, and faith. And even without knowing what would come next, he felt ready. Life now was a dance between the visible and the invisible, between dreams and action. And every step, even the uncertain ones, seemed guided by something greater than words could explain. At quiet night, before falling asleep, he looked up at the sky and whispered in gratitude, "I created all of this." A shiver ran through him, not of pride, but of reverence, because deep down, Lucas knew the universe had always been waiting for him to believe. And in that instant, life smiled back, confirming that the cycle of manifestation had been completed. And that's how Lucas discovered that the greatest power wasn't outside, but within him. Money, success, his own business, all of this was the result of an invisible yet profound shift. The way he began to see himself, when he exchanged fear for faith, despair for gratitude, and doubt for trust, the universe responded. And it didn't respond with words. It responded with results. Today, Lucas lives with purpose, not only because he achieved financial prosperity, but because he understood that true abundance is living in harmony with one's own mind. He became living proof that when you believe, feel, and act with intention, the impossible bends before your vibration. The law of attraction didn't change his world, it changed the way he saw it. And that was enough to transform everything. Maybe this story found you for a reason. Maybe the universe is showing you that life can smile at you too when you decide to smile at it first. So close your eyes for a moment, feel gratitude for what you already have, and silently say, "I am ready to receive." If this message resonated with you, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and stay tuned for future transformation stories. Because who knows, the next story the universe wants to tell might be yours.